Morning, church. Sometimes it's good for us to be reminded about why we do the things we do. Why do we come together every Sunday and join together in the Lord's Supper? You know, one might ask, well, doesn't that get sort of routine? Doesn't it get sort of, monotonous? You do it every Sunday. Wouldn't it be better if you did it, say, once a month, once a quarter, or even, how special would it be if you did it once a year? Well, I want us to think for just a few moments about why we come together every Sunday to join in the Lord's Supper. And it really has to do with the big picture. Because the Bible unfolds the big picture to us about who God is and who we are. And it calls us then to live with a broad view of life rather than just what's happening right now. It causes us to think about the past, about creation, about where we came from, about even before there was anything. It causes us to think about all those. It causes us to think about the future. Not just tomorrow, but what's going to happen 10,000 years to eternity. Just think about how Jesus describes himself. In the book of Revelation, there at the very end of the book, he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Everything started with God and everything will end with God. And the Bible is filled with the idea of reminding us of where we came from and where we're going. And we are called to live lives that are connected to beginnings and endings rather than just living for the moment. And what that causes us to realize then is that our thoughts, our desires, our words, our actions are connected to something greater. Think about what Jesus says just before he says, I am the Alpha and the Omega in Revelation 22 and verse 12. He says, behold, I am coming quickly, and my reward is with me to render to every man according to what he has done. What you and I say, what you and I think, what you and I do is connected to Jesus at the end of time. And somebody might say, well, why is that important? Because I think in the moment, our thoughts can seem more important than they really are. In the moment, our emotions can seem more reliable than they really are. In the moment, our needs can seem more essential than they really are. Paul Tripp said it this way, if eternity is the plan, then it makes no sense to shrink your living down to the needs and wants of this little moment. But let's think about that for just a moment, about living in the moment. Because the reality for all of us is that we do not live with eternity in view, at least not all the time. We live in the moment a lot. Our life shrinks down to that one moment. We get caught into thinking that those moments seem to be the most important thing in our life. For example, aren't there times, those moments when you think the most important thing is I got to get through this traffic? Aren't there the times when it's in the moment it seems like I just need to take this one more work phone call even though I'm with my family? Doesn't it seem like in the moment the most important thing is got to get in the last word, whether it's with my spouse or my friends. We've all been there. When that seems the most important. Or maybe it's the moment when our happiness and our contentment shrinks down to, I gotta have these new shoes. Or, I can't wait to eat that triple layer chocolate cake. And my point is not to say that any of that is bad. But what I want us to see is when we get to that point where those become the most important things in the moment, we lose sight of who God is. We lose sight of who we are and what eternity is all about. Again, Paul Tripp says there are moments when we get lost in the middle of God's story. We lose our minds, we lose our sense of direction, and we lose our remembrance of Him. You see, there is something more than just the moment. God reminds us that we were made for eternity. That's why Jesus says in Matthew 6 and verse 19, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where rust and moth and destroy, where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys, where thieves do not break in and steal. He's reminding us there's something more than just right now. And I truly believe that is one of the main reasons why we come together each and every Sunday. That the Lord's Supper helps us to remember that we are living for something more than just this moment. It helps us to reset our thinking from last week, from the physical to the spiritual. It helps us to give us what we need for what's ahead of us even next week. That which we don't know, but we got the help right now. Because of Jesus. You see, the Lord's Supper itself is not even about remembering a moment in time, but it is about remembering Jesus. Paul would say in 1 Corinthians 11, beginning in verse 23, he says, "For I received from the Lord what I also delivered to you, that the Lord Jesus, on the night when he was betrayed, took bread. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and said, 'This is my body, which is for you. Do this in remembrance of me.'" Jesus doesn't want us to remember a moment of his life. He wants us to remember him. Because when we remember him, we are called to think the big picture. We're called to think in terms of eternity. So this morning, as we partake of the Lord's Supper, I want us to remember what he gave up for each of us. The sacrifices that he gave as he came down and became human. I want you to remember how he lived for you. All of the things that he experienced for you. I want you to remember how he died for you. Each and every thing that he suffered for you. I want you to remember how he was raised for you. In all of that glory, everything that becomes the culmination, that's the reason why we are here on Sunday, because he rose from the dead. And in all that glory, he wants to share that with you. I want you to remember how he reigns for you now. Yes, he is King of kings. But he is doing so. He is reigning right now to serve you. To give you what you need. To be your mediator to the Father. You see, let us remember these things because they take us from the moment to thinking about eternity. As saints, that's what should be our focus. Let's remember these things as together we join in the Lord's Supper.